Mike's about to weld her up. He's actually gonna do this trick where he just welds right through the paint like I do. No, I'm just playing. He ain't that good.
No. Oh, I'm not that good?
Yeah, I weld through the paint.
That's not how it works.
So I got this little Harbor Freight welder. That's actually Mike's. And I just weld right through the paint. I mean, you got to get a little spark going, but then it actually, the welder burns the paint out the way. So when you're modifying that piece, you got to make sure that being that this is at an angle, the oil's still going to flow. So you got to cut your pieces at an angle. But I'm sure if Mike's putting together a video on that, he's going to go over how he done it or whatnot. But I just wanted to make sure I went ahead and disclosed in my video before somebody commented and said that you're going to block the oil flow. Just want to let you know you got to cut that at an angle. That way everything still flows. All right, so we've got our piece, our MMR piece that Mike redid, installed for the oil lines. So there's a better view from the bottom side of the car laying on the ground looking up. You can see how if we would have kept, you know, the things in the way like they were coming out here and they were just hitting this. So now Mike has them where they go straight back like that, and we can get these 90s where this steering rack clears. So he goes over it in his video, how he welds that up. Whenever he posts it, it works for us because now we have excellent amount of clearance where I'm not worried about hitting that block off. It's just the way this car is built with the angle of that, it wasn't gonna work. We got our oil filter housing right here, remote oil filter housing. That's what we're using this for, is because from the factory the oil filter housing bolts on right there. So you can order this remote housing adapter. That way you can mount the oil filter somewhere else. So all I'm doing right now is trying to figure out how our lines are going to go. We have these AN lines, and I'm just playing with the different routing options to get them where they clear around everything where as best as possible. So I got the lines in for the oil lines routed all in here. So they come down, they're going to clear just fine, and then they come down wrapped around here. I know it's hard for y'all to see, but that's basically it. Just take this off. So that's how they wrap around. They are going to get zip tied up, you know, to make sure they don't hit on nothing, obviously, because they're touching the steering boot, but they're going to get zip tied, you know, pulled up to here. And then I'm going to build actually a aluminum shield that curves like this, so that if we sling a belt, it doesn't damage the oil lines. But that turned out amazing. So shout out to Mike for welding up and modifying the MMR piece so that it fits. And again, these are, we went over in other video, these are used NASCAR AN lines. So if you go on eBay and search AN NASCAR and then change your search results to used, you can, you know, buy a lot of these, and they got the heat shields and everything on them. So that's pretty nice. That's the filter that we are running. From all my research shows that that's a good filter for the Coyote, supposedly. But that's what we're working on. So that's a short little update. I did go ahead and finish the limiter straps on this side that are built out of cable. I went over that in another video, how to build limiter straps so you don't have log chains flopping around and rattling under your car. Using these straps, I think they'll work pretty good. If they end up, you know, popping, I'll up to a larger cable and make some changes. But that's where I'm starting out at for right now. Putting the front suspension in, I'm gonna flip the camera around to show y'all what we got going on. The whole time I've had this car together, it's basically been mock-up. So let me show you what I mean on the front suspension being in mock-up. So here's, instead of the spring, okay, instead of your coil spring, I've had these pieces of PVC in there. That sets the car at ride height. So here's the spring that goes in there. Okay, some of y'all might have been wondering about this. I'm gonna put it over here in the light. So basically, here's the piece of PVC, and here's the spring that actually goes in the car. So of course, when you have the weight of the motor and transmission and all that, this spring will compress down. And I'm not even gonna lie to y'all right now on the camera, I can't even remember how I 100% figured that out. I believe I looked up the information on this spring when it was completely spread and completely compressed, and then, you know, found a happy medium and basically just kind of educated guess on it. I built the car I've had the adjustment set all the way down on the bottom of the coil springs the whole time, and I've always had this PVC in there. That way, the car with no engine, no transmission, and everything is at ride height. Because if you try to put the car together with a spring in there, then obviously the car is going to be, the car's going to be jacked way up in the air on the front because there's going to be no weight to hold the spring down. So you kind of build everything at ride height, and then so you can roll the car around. I had the PVC in there, but now what we got is I've put the spring in one side, and if I need to go up higher with the car, I can just turn up the thing. So there's it loaded in, and the adjustment's all the way down on it still. So the spring's in this side, and then if I want to raise the height of the car, we simply turn that up. Whenever you raise the height of the car, of course, that is going to tighten up your spring, and that might not be what you want, depending on what setting you're trying to do. So that's where I have adjustable shock hats at the top. So if we wanted to leave the spring exactly like it is, spaced out like that, and not turn that up, which would crush the spring, more in theory, we could literally just crank down the top, that will push that down, and that will leave the spring at what it is, basically. So I believe I have enough adjustments going on in these. These are strange springs on the front, adjustable. They are strange. You'll see here. Somebody's probably going to ask single adjustables, I think they were. Yeah, the single adjustables. This is what I just wanted to start out with. I've got a good deal on them used, and figured I would swap them out front, or swap them on the front, later on if I don't like them. More than likely at some point in the future after the car is running, not now. I'm gonna cut the front of this car off. So I'm gonna find another Maverick or whatever, and we're gonna clip the front of this car probably pull the motor out at some point later next year, and clip the whole front of the car basically at the firewall, and put a complete strut, race strut front end in it, with utilizing the factory location top strut perches. I'm sorry, my mind's blank on all the technical terms this morning, so bear with me if I'm saying stuff wrong. But when I do that, I plan to smooth the firewall, keep it in factory location so I fit them rules, but do some smoothing work on the firewall, and keep it back factory Maverick suspension, because right now it's a Mustang 2 front suspension, which is factory style suspension, but it's not factory to the car. And I do want to put the strut spring perches back in the top of them. So because on the Maverick it's a spring perch, it's not actually or top hat, whatever you want to call it, it's not actually strut, but they make conversion kits for the struts. Anyway, with all that tongue-tied stuff behind me, that's what we're working on. So I'm going to take the wheel off on this side, pull everything apart, do the final assembly. I've got to do cut down some bushings up top. Everything was basically in mock-up. I got that other side done the other afternoon. Let's see here, Friday afternoon, I think it was. And then Saturday we were at the track helping Turbo John. So yeah, that's where we're at. The angle, if anybody asks about my lower control arm angles, they are uphill at ride height. I originally built this car with 2-inch lowering spindles, and then realized that I was hurting myself, on travel. So I switched over to regular ride height spindles, and when I did that, I had to lower the car. I had to lower the car down to get it to sit back at ride height, and that's when it messed me up on my lower control arms, because when I built the car, they were parallel. They were perfect, parallel to the ground, so I'm hoping that doesn't hurt me. I've seen some other drag cars that are done like that, and they seem to be okay. The only information I can gather on the internet is that, with the lower control arms running uphill like that it could affect you on street driving. But in a race car format, that it isn't that big of a deal. So this is going to be a mix of a street car and a race car, so I think we'll be okay. Probably 75% track car, but I think we'll be okay. Once we get the springs in the other side, I do got to tackle going ahead and trying to finalize the alignment at some point, and setting the bump steer and all that, making sure. I had somebody on one of the Maverick pages the other day asking about the steering column and steering rack and all that. And I didn't point him in the direction of any of my videos because I actually didn't have any videos at that time on it. I told him everything was custom made because it is. You know, that's custom made. The rack is Pinto rack, and the steering column itself is a lightweight titanium column. So you can see it down there. That's all there is to it. Like there's no part numbers or nothing that, you know, I could give the gentleman to explain the, you know, the column and all that. It's all been custom built, as a lot of this stuff has. So all right, so while we have this thing apart here, if you didn't watch the video on the limiters, there's just a quick shot of them from the inside, and they are adjustable where you can take the nut and you can pull this up, which limits, you know, the amount that the bottom control arm droops. But anyway, while we're in here, these are our old brake lines. Well, they were new. I bent them for the first setup, and then I've kind of tucked them back since I redid all of the front up in here. But we have our ground and our hot lug. This would obviously, you know, go to the starter to feed it hot whenever it was, you know, whenever it needed it. And then our ground obviously is going to go to, you know, the engine block and a couple other places. So while I have this wheel all off this side, actually today, I think we're going to work on, we're definitely going to put the spring back in the side and all that. But we're going to also go ahead and build us up some grounds and, you know, our hots. Use our truck starter, put it in for mock-up, and go ahead and do them cables because we have yet to do them heavy-duty cables that are going to go to there. So this is what I'm doing is whenever I took apart my Coyote out of the F-150, originally I saved all the wires because I didn't know what I was going to use, because at that time it was just going to be basically a Coyote swap, not really like a Coyote build. So I'm just going to cut this insulation off of all these wires, this wire loom, and then we're actually going to use all the factory wiring hopefully on the starter, and then hopefully incorporate like, you know, one of these grounds or something. That way I don't have to do crimps on the end, you know, and heat shrinks and all that. So if you're doing one at your home, you know, and you don't have the tools to do the big crimps and, you know, to do all that nicely, you could literally hit the junkyard and, you know, find a Ford truck. I'm sure any year, make, and model practically work, and even probably a car, honestly, and you know, pull some of the wiring out like off the starter, you know, in the main grounds and stuff, and that will give you some heavy duty cable that you don't even have to make up. It's already made for you. So all you gotta do is just make sure the links will work, and the links should work. You know, I had stuff like this battery ground, which obviously I'm not using. I already built battery terminals, you know, but then you got little stuff like this, you know, this one on this side. So that's a good, you know, end for a ground. So this would make a good short little ground, possibly from the starter to, or not from the starter, but from the block to, you know, maybe the chassis or something. So we're gonna see what we got going on up here and start piecing these wires together. All right, so got all this put together over here. Got this shock installed. Got some cables ran. Still have a bushing to grind down and a nut to put up there, but do that here in a minute. But these cables, that's how they turned out. These are not clamped up or pushed back or anything like that. They're just sitting in here. But that's the hot cable, and I'm gonna end up clamping that up there like that. That way that's out of the way. I just kind of didn't want to do it right now until I finalize everything. I was just getting them in the direction that they go. There's the ground cable. The only thing I'm gonna change is that, you know, the ground cable is running under the frame right here, and I don't like that versus going up through here. That's the hot cable. It does have a bushing, rubber bushing installed, and there's the starter. So I went ahead and mocked up the starter. I left enough slack on this. Basically, if you ever need to unhook it, you can, and it'll sit up there out of the way. When everything's, you know, final assembled and put together, I'll definitely be zip tying, you know, all this stuff together. But right now it just goes up and zip ties to the motor plate, so it hangs up. And then the only reason why this extra is in here is just like a service loop, so that basically when you unbolt it, you have a little pigtail that you could push it out of the way instead of the cables being so tight. But very happy with how the power cable came out. You know, the hot goes up through here, and like I said, I want to move the ground. I want to take it off, and I want to drill a hole right here so that it comes under the rail and then shoots up through there. That way it's protected. And if I wanted to, I could even build a flat panel kind of that would bolt onto here, you know, for keep protecting for whatever from the tires, but I don't think it's needed. But if I go up through there, that will put the ground cable back here in the back corner, and then it'll just shoot straight up to there. And everything will be secured when it's done and out of the way. So it's pretty cool that finally got some starter wires, ran loosely on it. Nothing's finalized again. You know, making progress. Right now, what I was trying to do is just kind of look at how I was going to ground the cylinder heads. There's not really any good, excellent places on the back of the motor. I'm honestly thinking about grounding them off of the header bolts. If y'all have any opinions on that, let me know in the comments. Would I be okay just to, you know, after the headers are installed, put the ground on the header, you know, bolt. I know it gets extremely hot, but that's the only thing I'm worried about. Is I'm worried the heat from the headers transferring through the wire, you know, that everything will just get too hot. I'd like to keep it on the back side of the motor. On this side, I have a spot on the back that I can, you know, get a really big bolt in. Basically, it's like this size. I just have to go get a shorter one than this. And on the driver side, there's actually a spot on the head. Let's see if we can see it. Yeah, right here. You have 2 bolts. So you got them 2 bolts on the, you know, the head up there that I think would be easy to get to, you know, from here, from this angle, and easy to service with the grounds and not have to mess on the back of the head. But one of them big bolts like that on the passenger head is on the back side. So I'm thinking about doing them 2 spots for grounding the heads. I just got to get them bolts probably next weekend. And besides that, just doing little stuff, just trying to knock out some little stuff finally. I did measure the mid plate. Pretty interesting. You know, I've you know, been following a little bit on learning all that stuff, and it did learn that the Fox bodies and all of them seem to be like 88 to 90 inches, and then the next Mustang up, I believe, was 92 or 94. I was hoping mine would be at least, you know, same as the Fox body, since Fox body works good. And sure enough, mid plate to rear axle right now in this car is 90 inches. So pretty stoked about that. Would have loved it to be smaller, but at least I'm not like, you know, 96 inches, you know, or even 94 inches. So I'll take that. Starting to figure small things out. We got in the mail, let's see here, fuel filter. So this is a used NASCAR unit. You know, you can search on eBay for NASCAR fuel filters. This is just one that screws out and you have the element inside that you can clean or replace. And the reason why I went ahead and pulled the trigger on this one, there's always a bunch on there, but normally they don't have bar clamps. So, and all the other ones that didn't have bar clamps were literally the same price as this one with bar clamps. So I went ahead and snagged it. You know, being that it had the clamps. Basically, even if I don't use the clamps, it will still, you know, be like getting clamps for free. And I think I'm gonna just mount it up underneath here. It's on the subframe connectors, you know, mount it tucked up like this out of the car. I just don't know if I'm gonna be going up here or all the way back there. Basically, that determines on what kind of used AN line I can get, you know, if I need to make it more here or if the line's shorter on the backside in there. But that's my plans for the fuel filter, is just to tuck it up underneath here on the subframe connection, and that gets subframe connector, and that gives me basically a breaking point in, you know, buying used AN lines. If you bought a brand new line, you'd obviously make it run all the way from the front of the car to the back of the car. But being I kind of use used NASCAR stuff to plumb all this, you know, I kind of have to work what I got. So this is an excellent connection that you could put in wherever you need it. This is an excellent, you know, union or joint that you could put in wherever you need it at, and it actually serve a purpose. So looks a little rusty and the bolts are a little dirty, but it's functional. It'll do its job. I took the inside out, looked at it, and everything's nice and clean. So that's pretty cool. We got that. I'll probably go ahead and mount that just in the center under the car, just so that it's on the car, and just, you know, snug these up so that it's just loose. But besides that, man, we're just doing this weekend. I'm just going through and trying to do a bunch of little stuff like that to the car, make some ground, you know, cover some ground on it and make some progress. So still gonna have to go back and I'm gonna keep working on the grounds, I think, throughout the day, you know, the major ones, and going down the checklist on some of the electrical, get the wheel back on, grind that bushing, stuff like that. But that's where we're at on the Comet right now.